You know, if the patrol officers miss something, we can say, hey, we need to tag this, photograph and recover this, you know, and verify what the stories are that are coming. So, you know, if the victim told them, you know, this happened, we can verify, we can look at the scene, the overall scene that says, okay, that makes sense. Or if somebody's telling us something and we're looking at it and we're going, wait, how can that happen? You know, so the thing is, we're assessing everything.
Okay, and I guess in that sense, it's important to have that primary investigator there where there's important evidence, so that at the very least they can do that assessment.
At the crime scene, yes, sir.
Right. And somewhere in there you mentioned, you know, this issue about preservation of the scene, and sometimes it's already preserved with the yellow tape, sometimes it's not. Well, I mean, would that be accurate, that sometimes it's preserved with yellow tape, sometimes it's not?
What do you mean preserved, sir?
Well, what's the yellow tape for?
Basically, it's a line that says, this is a crime scene, only a certain authorized person can enter this area.
And what's that for?
To keep out non-essential personnel.
Why?
So they don't contaminate my crime scene.
Right, so you can preserve the evidence, right?
In that context, yes, sir.
Okay. And so, I mean, you're not the one who puts up this yellow tape, right?
No, sir.
And I guess, you know, let's take that a step further. Let's say it's a case where there's important DNA evidence, for example. What's the yellow tape for?
Again, sir, is to mark off the crime scene area, to keep people, unauthorized people out of the crime scene.
And why would you want to keep unauthorized people out of the crime scene?
So we can do our investigation.
And is it important for your investigation to preserve the evidence? I guess is with the best integrity possible, I guess?
Yes, sir.
And I guess the other way of saying that is it would be to prevent any kind of contamination of the evidence?
Yes, sir.
And in that regard, would it be fair to say that even patrol officers within a yellow tape crime scene, for example, with DNA, are restricted as to what they're allowed to touch once you're there?
Yes, sir.
And these are trained patrol officers who are presumed to be unbiased, right?
Yes, sir.
And why would you want to prevent unbiased patrol officers from touching, for example, DNA evidence?
We don't want anybody to contaminate the crime scene.
Including trained officers?
Yes, sir.
I guess what's the worst case in terms of preserving the integrity of that taped up area?
Judge, at this point, the state would object as to relevance into this line of questioning.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
Is that just because of time? I mean, how can I not be given at least some cross-examination time?
Judge, this whole time is cross-examination. I object as to relevance.
Well, okay, let me move on. Let me ask you this. Relative to the preservation of the integrity of DNA evidence at a crime scene, based on your police training, what is the most important principle there?
Judge, objection is to foundation and relevance.
And the objection is sustained.
That's what I'm trying to prove, is that he doesn't have a foundation.
Judge, objections to commentary. This is completely unnecessary.
Your Honor, how can I respond if I'm not being allowed to approach? Counsel can yell out anything he wants and I'm not
Judge,
allowed to
I
respond?
object as to characterizing this as
Let's
yelling
move on
out.
to the next question, please. Thank you.
Detective, what is Locard's principle about?
Excuse me, sir?
What is the term Locard's principle about?
I have no idea, sir.
Let me clue you in a little bit then. What, in the context of DNA preservation and the integrity of DNA evidence, what is Locard's principle about?
Objection is to ask and answer with respect to Locard's principle and speculation and foundation.
The objection is overruled. This is a different question, and why don't you restate it one more time, please?
Relative to the collection and the integrity of that collection of DNA evidence, what is Locard's principle about?
Objections to speculation and foundation, Your Honor. He's already
The
testified.
objection is overruled.
He's testified he has no idea what that means.
Ms. Rivera, I've already lost, please. Let me answer the question.
I do not know, sir.
So you're not aware of the principle of when two items come into contact, one is going to leave a trace on the other and vice versa?
If you put it in that terms, yes, sir. That I understand.
You just don't know what the name of that principle is? Is that your testimony?
Yes, sir.
When we're talking about that principle and preserving the integrity of DNA evidence, who would be the last person you would want touching that DNA evidence at your preserved crime scene?
Judge, again, at this point, relevance and speculation.
The objection is sustained.
Would it be fair to say that if the whole purpose of this yellow tape is to prevent even patrol officers who are unbiased from contaminating evidence, that you would certainly want those yellow tapes to prevent interested parties from gaining access to that evidence?
Objection again, Your Honor, relevance.
The objection is overruled. Let me answer the question.
If you can clarify that, I don't understand what you mean. You don't want interested parties?
Let's say there's a victim of a crime blaming somebody for something, and you have a yellow taped off area. Would you want that person blaming somebody for something going into that yellow taped area and having access to that evidence?
Judge, objection is an unfair hypothetical in this matter.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
You ever heard of the term the fox guarding the henhouse?
Yes, sir.
You'd agree with me that that would be the worst case in this taped out crime scene is the fox guarding the henhouse, right?
Objection is vague and relevance, Your Honor.
The objection is sustained.
Your Honor, he answered that he knows what the term is.
But let's put it in the context of his area of direct examination, please.
In the preservation of a crime scene, particularly a DNA crime scene, is it proper for an interested party to have access of the crime scene?
Judge, objection is vague.
I will sustain the objection.
Let me move on. Because your testimony was that, if I'm not mistaken, you spent 6 months in the persons division of the CID, right?
Approximately, yes, sir.
And that your training as of that 6 months within the person's division of CID did not include training on homicide investigations. Was that your testimony?
Yes, sir.
So are you saying that you were untrained to do this homicide investigation? Is that your testimony?
Judge, objection, that misstates the testimony of Sergeant Lou.
The objection is overruled. You may answer the question.
It wasn't a homicide when I first got it, sir. It was a missing person.
Okay. In terms of missing persons cases, though, your testimony was that how many missing persons cases have you been a part of as a patrol officer? What did you tell these people?
In my entire career?
As a patrol officer. I mean, you were asked by this already, by the prosecution on this already.
Yes, sir. Couple dozen.
Okay, so as a patrol officer, your testimony is that you did about 24 of them?
Approximately, yes, sir.
Well, I mean, when Mr. Rivera asked you the other day, didn't you say it was more like 36 or more closer to 40?
Judge, objection, that misstates the testimony.
The objection is overruled. You may answer the question.
Yeah, I can't give you an exact number.
Okay. And then, let me ask you, how many missing persons cases have you participated in as a detective?
I would have to estimate about 6.
Well, didn't you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the other day it was about a dozen?
Possible.
Because this is what I'm talking about. I mean, and because it doesn't stop there.
Your Honor, I object to commentary.
Well,
The
okay.
objection is sustained.
Because you've actually testified on even another you were actually asked that same question at another hearing when you actually answered as a patrol actually, hold on.
Please,
One second, yeah. I got it 1 second, Your Honor. Well, let me ask you, I mean, haven't you actually testified on those same questions before that you've done about 100 missing persons investigations?
I can't recall saying that.
Okay. I'll come back to that after lunch. Okay. I want to talk about your role as the primary investigator in this missing persons case, as you're calling it. In the context of a missing persons case, is there any significance in the term the first 48?
Not to me.
Not even from an investigative standpoint, there's no significance to you relative to the first 48 hours? Is that your testimony?
Well, you would like to find a person within the first 48 hours, but as far as relevance, I don't know what context you're putting that into unless you're try to.
Well, I
remake
want
a
to ask
TV
you, just
show.
based on your last answer.
Let him,
Oh, okay, I'm
make
sorry.
sure he finishes his answers first, all right? Thank you.
You know, there's a reality show called The First 48. Okay.
What channel is that on?
AMC.
And have you watched it?
I don't watch those reality shows.
How do you know about it?
You see the previews and stuff for them.
And you're saying that it's a reality show called First 48?
Something to that effect, yes, sir.
And this is in contrast to, I guess, CBS's 48 Hours? Or is that the same thing you're talking about?
CBS 48 Hours.
Well, strike that. I mean, I just want to get back to missing persons
Yeah.
cases. Is it your testimony that there's no significance or to the first 48 hours?
Well, as far as the context that you put it in, the importance of the first 48. First 48 is, you want to find the person as fast as you can.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, if I could stop you right there and ask you, if your testimony is that you want to find the person within the first 48 hours if you can, why?
You want to find the person within the first 48 hours, so you want to make sure that they're all right. So we can get them back to their loved ones, or we can get them help, or, we can reunite them with the family.
Okay. So is it your testimony that there is some significance to that first 48 hours then?
If you put it in that context, finding the person within the first 48 would be nice, yes.
And to be clear, that was one of your goals, was your primary goal was to find Charlie, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's talk about that first 48 hours. Because the missing report was made on February 10th, 2014 at about 10 p.m., right?
Yes, sir.
And you were assigned the next day, February 11th, at about 9 in the morning, right?
Yes, sir.
And so under those circumstances, 11 hours had elapsed before you started cracking on this case as the primary investigator, right?
Yes, sir.
Charlie was last reported, based on your investigation, being seen at about 8 p.m. on February 9th, 2014, right?
What was that, sir?
She was last reported seen at about 8 p.m. on February 9th, 2014, right? Based on the information you were given.
Yes, sir.
So by February 10th, at about 8 p.m., that would have been 24 hours of her missing, right?
Yes, sir.
And on February 11th, at about 8 p.m.-ish, that would have been 48 hours that she would be missing, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Between the time that she was last seen and your February 12th interview of Stephen Capobianco at little after 8 a.m., some 60 hours would have elapsed by the time of that interview, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can we agree that this is because by that time, Stephen was the sole target of your investigation?
No, sir.
I want to talk about what you did in finding Carly Scott during this time period. Because from the time that you're assigned, the first thing you do is review Officer Natividad's report, right?
Yes, sir.
3-page report? All right?
Yes, sir.
And it informed you of Kimberlyn Scott's statement, right?
Yes, sir.
It informed you of Stephen Capobianco's statement
Yes, sir.
to that officer. It gave you a description of Carly's vehicle, right?
Yes, sir.
It included results of Officer Thompson's and Officer Oricasa's checks of areas in the homicide, right?
Yes, sir.
Which included checks of the Hono Manu area, right?
Yes, sir.
At about 3 or a little past 3 in the morning, correct?
Yes, sir.
And this included a search from Kaumahina Park to Kanai by those 2 officers, right?
Yes, sir.
And just, by the way, in order to get into Honomanu Bay, is that the same access road as that you would have to take to get into Lua Bay?
No, Honolulu and Nuailua is 2 different roadways, sir.
Okay, 2 different access points?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So all this was contained in a 3-page report from Officer Natividad, right?
Yes, sir.
How long does it take you to review that report?
$30 or less?
Well, haven't you testified before that it takes you about 5 to 10, it took you about 5 to 10 minutes?
I don't recall if I said that, but yeah. Yes, sir.
So more accurately, about 5-10 minutes to read a 3-page report, right?
Yes, sir.
After you read that report, you do a criminal history check on Stephen Capobianco, right?
Yes, sir.
About 10 minutes? For an experienced person like you to run a criminal background check, what does that take, about 10 minutes?
Oh, yes, sir.
Not even, right? About 5 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so far we've accounted for about 15 minutes of your investigation, maybe 20.
Judge, objection is to, it's not the testimony.
Would that be correct?
Excuse me.
I object to misstates the testimony.
The objection is overruled. You may answer the question. The question was, so far we've accounted for about 15 minutes of your investigation, maybe 20. You may answer that question.
Yes, sir.
I guess after that, you talk back and forth with AT&T about some phone records, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you do anything before, I guess in between, I'm sorry. Did you do anything before talking to AT&T about phone records? Prior, subsequent to doing the criminal background check? Anything else in between?
Trying to get a photograph of Charlie for the flyer.
Okay, well, we'll talk about the you did. Are you saying you did that after you did the criminal background check, but before you? Well, when are you saying you did that? The flyers and the photo for the flyers.
The day?
I'm sorry.
I'm not following your timeline.
And that's what I'm trying to establish is your timeline on how you did things, okay? Because you established that you read the report first, and then you did a criminal history check. Would it be accurate that the next thing you did was call the phone company, or did you do something before calling the phone company? do you remember telling the judge that in terms of how many missing persons cases you have worked both in patrol as well as CID, your answer in that hearing was that you did about 100 investigations. Would that be accurate?
Can I see the transcripts?
Sure. Can I approach now?
You may do so.
Line 17 through 22. I guess before you do that, Detective, I mean, well, go
Can I
ahead.
object to another question at this point? One's been asked already.
The objection is sustained.
Okay.
And I just showed you that transcript outside, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, wouldn't you agree that you told the judge in that hearing that you had done about 100 missing persons investigations in your career?
Yes, sir.
So that would be your third different answer under oath, right?
Judge, objection, Your Honor, that's argument.
The objection is overruled. You may answer the question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, after you go downstairs and distribute, I guess, what you distributed, did you do anything else? Actually, what did you do next?
And I talked to the patrol officers, if I recall correctly, their supervisors, went to dispatch, gave them the flyers, told them to air that APB out for Charlie. Went back to my office.
Did you do anything else? Well, let me ask you this. Did you go down to the airport and distribute anything?
Eventually, yes, sir.
When you say eventually, would it be during this time period or at a different time?
Was during that day.
And why would you have done that?
Just a common practice that I have for all missing person cases, you know, because we don't know the circumstances, so we just want to put, you know, TSA and the airlines on alert and stuff, just in case that person does show up.
Okay, and so what did you do relative to this investigation and that? I know what you typically do, but what did you do here?
To my best recollection, sir, after, you know, I make up some more flyers, put it together, go down there, talk to security, talk to TSA, go down to all the different airlines, talk to the managers over there, hand them out the flyers and stuff, and says, hey, you know, if you can, check your records, see if this person flew out on your airlines.
Well, Detective, let's make sure you're not making stuff up, because I think you testified.
Commentary, Your Honor.
The objection is sustained. You're going to have to stop doing that, Mr. Upwell.
Well, the thing.
You can ask questions. You can't add all that commentary, all right? Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
When I asked you what you did next, you couldn't even remember that you went down to the airport, right?
Well, you're asking me what I did next after I went down to patrol to dispatch back to my office. You know, I can't like give you a blow by blow of exactly everything I did that day.
But you'd agree with me that you just gave a blow by blow as to what you did down at the airport, even though you didn't even remember going to the airport at first.
Judge, objection, that misstates.
The
testimony.
objection is overruled. You may answer that question.
See, the thing is, I went down to the airport, okay? But the way you asked the question is, what did I do after I We went down to patrol and stuff, okay? I don't know exactly, I cannot tell you exactly what I did. All right, I know I went down to the airport. I know I passed out the flyers.
Okay, did you do anything else?
Judge, I object as to vague at this point.
Well, if I ask him what he do next, apparently that doesn't go.
Counsel, that's not an appropriate response. Did you do anything else with the, at any time? Please rephrase your question. The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
Judge, may I ask when I'm going to have my opportunity to put things on the record?
Not now. I can give you the opportunity every day if you wish.
Well, let me ask you, Detective, how long did it take you to go to the airport and do what you did?
I can't give you an exact time estimate, sir.
Well, you went from the Wailuku police station to the airport, which is what, about a 5-10 minute drive?
Depending on traffic, yes, sir.
And then you parked and you went and talked to people. Let me ask you this. Do you know a bunch of retirees who work over there for security?
Yes, sir.
Did you talk story with them while you were there?
Yes, sir.
Would you agree with me that's one of the reasons why you personally went there, was just to talk story with retirees?
Just to talk story, no, sir.
Because you'd agree with me that this kind of task could easily be assigned to a patrol officer to go down, or multiple patrol officers to go down and hand flyers out to airport employees, right?
That's not their function, sir.
And that's because you say so, right?
Judge, our objection is argumentative.
The
There's-
objection is
Judge, this is
sustained.
cross-examination.
That is not cross.
I don't get to even poke as to the accuracy or genuineness of his answer.
Objection to commentary at this point.
All you need to do is rephrase the question. You can ask the question, but you can't ask the way you asked.
Judge, I have to put on the record that I have a serious problem with this speaking objections. The eliminate is no speaking objections. I'm not having any opportunity to put anything on the record because I'm not being allowed to approach. I'm not being allowed to respond because it's in front of the jury.
Judge, this is a speaking objection. I object.
I would ask that both of you simply, if you don't object, state your grounds, state it, and then if there's a response, just give me a short response, 5 words or less should be adequate.
Detective, why is it so important for you personally to have distributed those flyers or whatevers to airport personnel rather than patrol officers?
Well, one, it's part of my responsibility as a detective to distribute that because patrol officers are busy responding to other in-progress cases or other cases, that they get assigned to. So they don't have the luxury of picking up my flyers, driving it down to the airport and distributing it out because they got to respond to other cases.
So your testimony is that as the primary investigator of this case, it was more important for you to distribute flyers at the airport than to, for example, make contact with Charlie's last known family members to have seen her?
Judge, I object that misstates testimony.
The objection is overruled. You may answer the question.
Can you repeat the question, please?
In terms of the value of your time in this investigation, your testimony to these ladies and gentlemen of the jury was that it was more important for you to go distribute flyers to an airport personally rather than, for example, calling one of the last people that Charlie was with to ascertain further information?
An objection, Your Honor, that was not Sergeant Liu's testimony.
It will be.
The objection is...
He just said it will be. That was
Excuse
not
me,
his
stop.
testimony.
Well, the objection is overruled. You may answer the question.
One more time, please.
Is it your testimony that in the context of finding Carly Scott, it was more important for you to personally go hand out flyers at the airport rather than, for example, speaking with the last family members that she had been seen with before she went missing?
That is not. Sir. No, sir.
Okay. You did testify that you did spend some time talking stories with some of the old timers over at the airport security when you went down there to distribute what you did?
Well, I talked to them, yes, sir.
Okay. So, how long did you spend at that airport doing those tasks?
I can't give you a time frame, sir.
Can you say about half an hour? I mean, hour?
I can't give you that answer. I don't know how long it took.
Well, let me ask you this. Would looking at your report refresh your recollection as to how long it took?
Yes, sir.
Because to be clear, if part of your investigation of finding Carly Scott was to go to the airport and distribute flyers, that would be in your report, right?
Not necessarily, sir.
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor?
Thank you, sir.
When you have refreshed your recollection as to how long it took, let me know.
Okay.
Okay. Were you refreshed as to how long it took you to distribute those?
Oh, it's not in my report, sir.
Detective, how long have you been writing reports?
My entire career.
And wouldn't it be fair to say that you're trained to write full and accurate reports?
Yes, sir.
And that if something's important in your investigation, that's something you put in your report? Right?
Yes, sir.
You're saying to this, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that it was important for you personally to go down to that airport and distribute these flyers, correct?
As part of my responsibilities, yes, sir.
Well, not only that, but you're testifying that it was so important that you personally had to do it.
Judge, I object that misstates testimony.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
You're trained to put important things into your report, right?
Yes, sir.
That's not in your report, right?
No, sir.
You couldn't even remember when I asked you about going to the airport, right? Well, let me ask you this. Detective, I'll withdraw that question.
Question is,
Detective, isn't it possible that you didn't even go to the airport?
No, sir.
Okay. If you did go to the airport, can you estimate about how long you were there?
If you want an estimation, say an hour.
Okay. Do you remember anybody who you personally spoke with when you went to that airport?
No, sir.
Who in general would you have spoken to? You said TSA, but are you, I mean, well, is it just TSA?
No, sir.
Who else?
Would be TSA, airport security or police, the managers at the different airlines.
When you say different airlines, what, you go to like the baggage, where they check in baggage and talk to them, or where do you go?
To the counters.
Do you have any special relationship with anybody there at the counter or something?
No, sir.
And I take it that, well, let me ask you, what did, other than pass out the flyer, do you inquire whether Carly is known to have got on a flight or anything like that?
I asked the airlines to, if they can check their records, and if they do find anything, to let me know.
Okay. And that took about an hour.
Approximately, yes, sir.
At some point, well, let me ask you this. Well, at some point, would it be your testimony that you go to the hospital?
I don't recall going to the hospital, sir.
Okay, so your testimony is that you did not go to the hospital to follow up in your investigation.
I called them.
You called them, okay. And who did you call?
That would be admitting.
Now, you'd agree with me that after reviewing Officer Natividad's report, you knew that Officer Natividad had checked hospitals as well, right?
Correct, sir.
Now, I take it that when an officer checks hospitals for someone that's missing, it would be the same way that you check the airport. You would check whether they've already been there, and then you'd ask them to give you a call if they show up afterwards, right?
I don't understand the question.
I take it that when you went down, for example, to the airport, you asked them, hey, can you tell me whether Carly Scott got on a flight, right?
Okay, yes, sir.
Okay, and then at the airport, I take it, you asked the airlines to give you a call if she tried to get on a flight, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I take it that's the same in the hospital setting as well. That the practice is, you ask whether she's been admitted, right?
Yes, sir.
And the practice is that you ask the hospital to give MPD a call if she subsequently checks in, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you'd agree with me that that's routine practice when you check the hospital, jail, places like that.
Yes, sir.
So if Officer Natividad already did that at the hospital, why would you have to go to the hospital?
Objection. There's no testimony that he went to the hospital.
the objection is suspended.
Thank you.
Well, you know from Officer Natividad's report that he checked the hospital, right?
Yes, sir.
And that proper police work by Officer Natividad would check if Carly had been checked in, right?
Objection calls for speculation.
This is-
Officer, Sergeant didn't do the check.
This goes for police procedure,
Again, speculation.
The objection is overruled.
right?
One more time, sir.
When Officer Natividad went to the hospital, if he was following procedure, he would have done the same thing. He would have asked the hospital, hey, is Carly Scott checked in? If not, can you call Maui Police if she does? Right?
I would hope so, sir.
So why would you have to go back to the hospital?
Just to make sure.
Objection, hold on. There's no testimony that Sergeant went to the
Yeah.
hospital, Your Honor.
The objection is sustained, but just state your grounds.
Okay.
I don't need an explanation
sorry.
when you object. Please.
Misstates the evidence.
All right, thank you.
Why would you have to recheck the hospital if the hospital is already on alert to call you if she comes in?
Just to verify, to make sure, because sometimes the person may have checked in, but the hospital might be too busy, or they don't pass the message on to the next shift or the other personnel, you know?
When did you make that call to the hospital then? I take it there was a elapse of time before you were that concerned to make that call?
Sometime during the daytime, sir.
And I take it that you felt that that was an important thing to do?
That's part of my investigation.
And did you note that in your report as part of your investigation?
No, sir.
Is that possibly because it didn't happen?
No, sir.
Let's say you did go down to the hospital from the Wailuku police station, did that, and what came back. How long would that have taken you?
Objection, assume facts, not evidence.
The objection is sustained.
My bad, how long would it have taken you to make that phone call?
Approximately 5-10 minutes.
Is that even stretching it? I mean, does it take 5-10 minutes to...
Well, it all depends on, you know, if somebody answers the phone or I get put on hold, they gotta check their computers, you know.
So you're guessing about that, and,
I'm
and
saying-
you're kind of taking into account that that might have happened?
I'm saying approximate, yes, sir.
Okay, so you say about 10 minutes?
Approximately 5-10 minutes.
Okay, Detective, I want to ask you before I move on, is there anything else that you did during your initial investigation prior to speaking with Stephen to find Carly Scott?
Yes, sir. Kimberly Scott recontacted me.
Okay.
She wanted to know.
Well, not what she wanted to know, but so you spoke with Kimberly Scott again. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How long was that I'm sorry, how did that take place?
She called me up on the telephone.
Okay, and how long was that telephone conversation?
Estimated approximately 15-20 minutes.
Okay. Anything else prior to speaking with Stephen in terms of an investigation to find Carly?
I did call Mr. Capobianco that afternoon, asking if he's available to come that day to come speak with me.
Okay, and that's to speak with Stephen, right? In terms of actively investigating to find Carly Scott, other than speaking with Stephen, was there anything else that you did prior to speaking with Stephen?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, let me try to do some math here. If we were at 125 minutes when you distributed things down stairs at the station. And we add, I guess, the hospital time, the airport time. Would it be accurate to say that adding all that time that you testified about comes out to about 205 minutes of investigation to find the missing person here?
Well, according to your calculations, yes, sir. That.
Well, do you have any other calculations that you want to proffer?
You know, it's a day. I cannot give you.
No, in terms of this calculation, do you have any different calculations?
No, sir.
Okay. So within the first 48 hours, as the primary investigator, you spend a total of 205 minutes actively pursuing where Carly Scott is. Would that be accurate to say?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this all while you're waiting to interview Stephen Capobianco, right?
Yes, sir.
You're not waiting to interview anybody else, are you?
Well, I have other cases I'm working on at the same time.
On this case, were you waiting to interview anybody else other than Stephen Capobianco during that first 48 hours?
No, sir.
You were given information both in in Officer Natividad's report, as well as your follow-up, as far as who was the last to see Carly in terms of family members, right?
Yes, sir.
And who were those family members known to be the last to see Carly?
Judge, objection is hearsay.
The objection is sustained.
You know who they were, right?
Judge, objection, hearsay.
I'm not asking for who they are. I'm just asking whether he knows who they
It
are.
calls for hearsay.
I'm not asking who they are.
The objection is overruled.
You know who they were, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, would you agree with me that in the context of a missing person case, one of the most important things an investigator can do is talk to the last people known to have seen the missing person, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, other than what you were told to be Stephen, while you were waiting to interview Stephen, did you speak to any of those known people about what they know relative to Carly's disappearance?
No, sir.
And we're talking about sisters, right?
Judge, objection, now we're getting into hearsay.
The objection is sustained.
Well, let me ask you, what was your understanding as far as the last known family members to have seen Charlie?
Judge, again, this is hearsay.
This goes to his understanding and knowledge.
Hearsay.
The objection is sustained.
You'd agree with me that If these people had information, for example, what she was last wearing, that would be important, right?
Objection, speculation, and based on hearsay.
Speculation as to what a person is.
No,
I'm just answering. I'm sorry. I can't approach, so I don't know what to do, Judge. I'm sorry.
what you do is you respond to the objection if you have a response. You don't just stand there and talk to yourself. All right? The objection is overruled. You may answer the question.
Can you ask one more time, sir?
In your experience relative to missing persons cases, what are some of the important factors you're looking for to begin your search?
That would be, any mental issues, any health issues, where they might hang out, who they might hang out with, where they would go,
What they drive,
what they drive.
what they were wearing last.
What they were wearing last, yes, sir.
I mean, wouldn't you agree with me that that's kind of a biggie when we're talking about finding a missing person and alerting people what to look for would be what they were wearing last?
Yes, sir.
Now, in that context, other than waiting for an interview with Stephen, did you go talk to any of those known witnesses who would have been able to provide you with the information as to what she was wearing last?
No, sir.
You'd agree with me that there was nothing stopping you from doing that, right?
No, sir.
But what you chose to do instead was not do that and wait for an interview with Stephen instead, right?
Yes, sir.
And that would be, plainly speaking, because Stephen was the sole focus of your investigation by that point.
No, sir.
Would it be fair to say that with your double checking of a hospital, strike that. Okay. So at some point you contact Stephen on February 11th to arrange an interview, right?
Yes, sir.
And in doing that, you call him up, right?
Yes, sir.
And what you tell him specifically is that you needed to talk to him, right?
Yes, sir.
But he tells you that he's out searching for Carly, but he's willing to meet with you tomorrow, right?
Yes, sir.
And that's okay with you, right?
Yes, sir.
And you arrange to meet with him the following morning.
Yes, sir.
So let's be clear. If you did actually have any genuine concern about Stephen being involved in criminal wrongdoing, you were willing to wait until February. I'm sorry, what was the date that you interviewed? February 12th, right?
Yes, sir.
You were willing to wait for that date, right?
I object to it's confusing.
The objection is overruled. You may answer the question.
At this point, sir, there is no criminal case. I'm investigating a missing person.
So is that to say that at this point you had no concern about the well-being of Carly? I'm sorry, strike that. Is that to say, strike that as well. Move on. Subsequent to telling Mr. Capobianco over the phone that you needed to speak with him, but prior to reading him his Miranda rights, do you ever tell him that he didn't need to meet with you?
No, sir.
Wouldn't it be fair to say, under the circumstances of your request, that if Stephen told you he didn't want to come meet with you, you would be even more suspicious of him?
Chair's objection is calls for speculation.
The objection is sustained.
To be clear, before you meet with Stephen, you run his criminal background check, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you run that criminal background check against anybody else that you call prior to speaking with Stephen?
Yes, sir.
Who?
Depends on the type of cases I'm investigating.
Oh, you're talking about other cases. But in this case, in this investigation, prior to speaking with Stephen, did you run any criminal background checks on anybody you were about to interview other than Stephen?
For this particular case?
Yes.
For just this particular case, if I'm understanding it correctly, I did run a background check on Mr. Capobianco.
Okay. My question is, other than Stephen Capobianco, prior to speaking with him, did you run anybody else's criminal background check?
If you're talking about other investigations that I'm doing, yes, sir.
I'm talking about this investigation, okay? You, for example, spoke with Kimberlyn Scott prior to speaking with Stephen, right?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. Did you, well, let me ask you, did you use the word that you needed to speak with her?
I can't recall exactly.
Did you run a criminal background check on her before you spoke to her?
No, sir.
And in particular, when you run a criminal background check for Stephen before interviewing him, you run it to check whether he has any crimes of violence, right?
Yes, sir.
And even more particularly, you run a check to see if he has any crimes of violence against Carly Scott, right?
Yes, sir.
Can you recall when you made this criminal background check?
Sometime during that day.
Well, relative to the interview, was it right before or a lot before?
It was before the interview, the day prior.
Okay. And then you wait till the next day and you do meet with him, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when you meet with him, what was your intent for that meeting?
Just to get some background information on his relationship with her, why she could be missing, if there's any problems, if there's any issues, general information.
Okay. Now, was it your intent going into that interview to accuse him of threatening Carly, for example?
No, sir.
Was it your intent to interrogate him regarding whether he did anything to Carly Scott?
No, sir.
Was it your intent going into the interview to ask him whether he had anybody else do anything to Carly Scott?
No, sir.
And your whole thing in saying no is because he wasn't a suspect for anything, would be your testimony, right?
He wasn't a suspect, no, sir.
And if it wasn't your intent to ask those questions, would it be a testimony that you didn't ask those questions?
No, sir.
No, sir, you didn't ask those questions, or did you ask those questions?
Yes, sir.
What you do, in fact, ask him is,
Judge, I object as a hearsay at this point. He already agreed and he asked those questions.
it's already in evidence.
The objection is over. Well, you didn't finish your question, so at any rate, why don't you finish your question?
Indeed, while you say that this was an interview about just finding a little bit more background on Carly, you asked Stephen expressly whether he did anything to Carly Scott, right?
Something to that effect, yes, sir.
And you asked him expressly whether he harmed Charlie Scott because over the baby issue, right?
Yes, sir.
And you expressly asked him whether he had anybody else do anything to Carly Scott, right?
Yes, sir.
You'd agree with me that those are accusatory questions, aren't they?
Depends on the context of how it's said.
Okay. Well, I mean, it also depends on the context of where it's said. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, sir.
Because that interview took place after he met with you outside of the Wailuku police station, right?
Yes, sir.
And you take him into the police station to your office, would be your testimony, right?
Yes, sir.
And your office is contained in the Criminal Investigations Division larger office, right?
Yes, sir.
And just to be clear, are patrol officers allowed in that area unescorted without detectives? Well, actually, let me strike that. Let me back up. In order to get into that CID division where you take Stephen to interview, how do you get into the bigger office?
You need a swipe card to get into the station and a swipe card to get into my office.
Okay. Now, the swipe card to get into your office, and your office is, you're referring to the bigger CID office or your individual office within that bigger CID office? Which one are you referring to when you say your office?
Well, the CID office, the main area of CID, because we don't have individual offices inside the CID office.
So it's the bigger CID office is what you're referring to when you say your office?
Yes, sir.
So you take Stephen into that part of it by swiping your card, right?
Yes, sir.
And just to be clear, not even a patrol officer has those swipe cards to get into that part of the department, right?
They don't have access, no, sir.
Right. So if we're talking maybe about the most secure part of that Maui Police Department building over there, this CID office is one of the more secure areas, correct?
Yes, sir.
Even relative to the patrol officers.
Yes, sir.
So you take Stephen behind that closed door, and the door closes behind him, right?
Yes, sir.
And you walk him to yet another room, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that other room you call an what do you call it?
Interview room.
Interview room. How many interview rooms are there within the CID division?
2.
And these interview rooms, are they specially equipped?
Yes.
What are they
well, depends on what you're talking about, specially equipped.
Well, when you say yes, what special equipment are you talking about?
There's video
Okay, what about audio?
and audio.
Is the video and audio incorporated together?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, how many interview rooms?
2.
Are both of them equipped with the audio and video?
Yes, sir.
When a CID, for example, persons detective, wants to interview the worst suspect in a crime, would you agree with me that they would be taken to one of those interview rooms to be interrogated?
To be interviewed, yes, sir.
Well, if it's on that level, it would be to be interrogated, right? If it's a suspect in a crime.
Well, I don't use the word interrogate. I just use the word interview.
Is there no such thing as the word interrogation in your mind?
There is.
You just like to consider everything you do as an interview rather than an interrogation?
Yes, sir.
So you don't purport to do interrogations? Just
I do.
interviews?
I could. To me, they're interviews.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, does it take a swipe card to get into the interview room?
Oh, no, sir.
It's just a matter of opening the door and all of you went in?
Yes, sir.
It was Detective Detective Lee also there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Just, I mean, approximately, how long has Detective Lee been on my police force?
I can't give you an accurate as far as his years.
I mean, over 20 years, right?
I would say approximately 20 years.
And long enough to be in the CID division, right?
Yes, sir.
How long had he been in the CID division up to 2000? Well, about how long has he been in the CID division up to now?
I can't tell you an approximate. I can tell you several years.
I mean, you'd agree with me that, in general, he's one of the more experienced Maui Police Department officers as well as Maui Police Department detectives, right?
Yes, sir.
So what we're talking about is taking Stephen past some secured doors into an interview room with 2 of the most experienced Maui Police Department officers and detectives in the department at a time when there's not even a crime?
Yes, sir.
Wouldn't you agree with me that that's a little questionable in terms of allocation of resources?
Objection, relevance, and speculation.
Well, if-
So, you may answer the question.
Can you ask one more time, sir?
Wouldn't you say that that's a little disproportionate in terms of the appropriation of resources in the Maui Police Department if you're putting 2 of the most experienced detectives in the department on a simple missing persons case?
No, sir.
So that's typical whenever some kid gets lost. It ends up with 2 of the most experienced detectives taking the case. And
Basically, it comes down to whoever's available and whoever the lieutenant assigns.
in this case, it was important enough to assign two of the most experienced Maui Police Department investigators in the department, right?
No, sir.
Mr. O'Connor, with this, may I quickly-
Oh, it would.
Recess. All right, and ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a recess at this time. Thank you.